Hey, pull up a chair. We're so glad to have you join us here on the Back Porch Education Podcast. For the next half hour or so, we're going to talk about all things educational. It's a wonderful day to learn something. Glad you could join us.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We're back with another episode. Steve, guess what I have today?
Did you bring a puppy with you?
No,
Yeah,
no puppies.
So
I have a story.
A story?
Yeah.
Ooh. Does it have
It's
a poem in it?
Poetry, though.
Oh, I was going to say.
Yeah. So here's the deal. I like Robert Frost, as almost everyone knows, and Frost has a poem called Our Doom to Bloom. Like sort of a subscript of that is the first line is "Shine, perishing republic, Robinson Jeffers." So by reading Frost, I find out about this guy named Robinson Jeffers and that he has a poem called "Shine, perishing republic." Well, we're talking about the Republic today for our episode. And so I hunt down one of my poetry books, and there it is. It says "Shine Republic, Robinson Jeffers." And so I open it up expecting to find that poem, but it's a different poem. So apparently this guy, Robinson Jeffers, wrote two different ones, "Shine Republic" and "Shine Perishing Republic." But I only know about them from Frost.
Well, there you go.
So even when it's not Frost, it's Frost, right? So, okay, here goes. This is a good one. "Shine Republic. The quality of these trees, green height, of the sky shining, of water, a clear flow, of the rock, hardness and reticence, each is noble in its quality. The love of freedom has been the quality of Western man. There is a stubborn torch that flames from Marathon to Concord, its dangerous beauty binding 3 ages into one time. The waves of barbarism and civilization have eclipsed, but have never quenched it. For the Greeks, the love of beauty, for Rome, of ruling, and for the present age, the passionate love of discovery. But in one noble passion, we are one. And Washington, Luther, Tacitus, Aeschylus, one kind of man. And you, America, that passion made you. You were not born to prosperity. You were born to love freedom. You did not say in mass. You said independence. But we cannot have all the luxuries and freedom also. Freedom is poor and laborious. That torch is not safe but hungry and often requires blood for its fuel. You will tame it against it burn too clearly. You will hood it like a kept hawk. You will perch it on the wrist of Caesar. But keep the tradition. Conserve the forms, the observances. Keep the spot sore. Be great. Carve deep your heel marks. The states of the next age will no doubt remember you and edge their love of freedom with contempt of luxury. What'd you think, Steve?
So I get why you chose it. It brings the Greeks clearly into mind, but it's it evokes a lot of images all at once, and which is what a poem's supposed to do. And I like it. I like the attachment of tradition to freedom, because I get a student with a promise that we're going to read anything more than about 10 years old, something written more than 10 years ago, and there's this rising gorge within them of that's old. And so I teach a course in which we read throughout Western history, and we read Plato. We read a portion of the Republic, and before they start reading it, the The concern is that this dude is so old, he's not going to have anything I can understand, or even worse, anything I can use. That he's just not going to connect with.
Mm.
He doesn't have a smartphone, Mr. Elliott. So I'm excited for our conversation today because I have never once. I've always challenged a student. Well, jump in and see if you can, at the end of Plato, convince me that he's had nothing to say to you. I'll consider, because often this is a practical conversation about what we really ought to be reading in this class, Mr. Elliott. And it certainly isn't these old dudes. We need to be reading the people on the edge,
Right.
people that are thinking the new thoughts of the moment. And I just challenge. I get what you're talking about. If Plato doesn't do it for you, let's talk about it, because I'll A, be shocked, and B, I'll consider the wisdom of what you're saying to me if you can demonstrate that wisdom. If you could show me,
sure,
yeah, we gave it a fair reading, and it's just old and moldy and of no use to us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the poem because it's saying you're here, but there's a lot of back there to be used here.
Yeah. How did he say it? Jefferson said, in one noble passion, we are one. Right? Like the love of freedom has been the quality of Western man. Jeffers is really interested in tying the present to the past and using that like as a mirror. And I think if we choose not to do that, it's to our own detriment, right? That in philosophy is kind of paramount. Well, maybe theology, and then philosophy, is huge in terms of understanding the present by understanding the past.
Yeah, well, and I think there is certainly a lot that we appreciate in our present day circumstances. We benefit from the external eye, the eye of science. The physical eye of observation has over time produced for us a lot of comfort, a lot of labor-saving devices, a lot of ways to prolong life.
Absolutely.
We can travel this world so much more easily than Plato could. But very early on in, well, it's not real early in the Republic, but Book 7 of the Republic, Plato just sort of outs with it and gives us this great quote comparing the outer eye and the inner eye. He says, in every man there is an eye of the soul, which is more precious far than 10,000 bodily eyes. For by it alone is truth seen. And when you get the modern, to say, well, I'm only going to believe it if I can see it with my eyes, and he may or may not be talking about his two physical eyes, but often he means you've got to prove it to me in the laboratory through scientific observation, and everything else is off the table.
Right.
Plato says, yeah, your eyes are good. He's not promoting blindness here.
Right.
He's just saying there's something 10,000 times better, and that's the eye of your mind or your soul or your inner eye. That alone is able to discern this thing we call truth. Your outer eye can deceive you, does deceive you on a regular basis.
Sure.
Plays tricks on you. That inner eye, if it's properly trained, is really sensitive to the truth.
Yeah.
And won't be fooled by quote unquote optical illusions.
Right.
So
man, I'm heading straight to the Sermon on the Mount from there, right? Where Christ says, the eye is the lamp of the body. And so, oh man, I can't just quote it, extemporaneously here, but essentially, if the eye, now let's see, if the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If everyone has an inner eye, we're calling it, right? Maybe we can undress it a little bit and say the soul's perception of truth. But everybody's soul is making truth claims and talking about, well, telling themselves a story about how the world is. And if you aren't training that eye, it's still making decisions, but it's tyrannical. I mean, it's chaotic, messed up.
Plato loves analogies, and his great teacher Socrates, whom he's taken the voice of, and in all his dialogues, Plato doesn't speak. It's Socrates that's putting this forth, even though I think some of the things that he has Socrates say, Socrates probably didn't say.
Yeah,
but
right.
In education, this is so vital to what we're at the,
Right.
If we're trying to cultivate wisdom and virtue,
right,
seminal to that enterprise is some notion of what is wise and virtuous. What is the truth?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get there? Is it a scientific method?
Right.
Everyone practicing exactly the same formula with their five senses to derive. I mean, there are people that believe that ethics is a problem of science, but I'm not one of those. I think that there's a much bigger life of the soul, and if you try and answer the questions of the soul with the eyes, or even just with rationality alone, you're a blind man grabbing a hold of an elephant thinking you understand the whole when you only got a part of it.
Yeah. Well, if you keep talking about faith and reason, I'm going to dive deep into Kierkegaard. We're never going to get out. So let's take a break and we'll come back and jump into the Republic.
Hey, during this brief break, I wanted to encourage you to use the share buttons we have on our website in order to help us get folks tuned into the show. Our goal is to encourage as many educators, homeschoolers, NFL punters, and donut makers as we can with these podcasts. So help us get the word out. Share our Facebook page, send folks a link to one of your favorite episodes. Do whatever you can to help us share this craziness with either your best friends or, if it's more appropriate, your worst enemies. We will love you all the more for sharing our love. Thanks. And now, back to the show. We could wander around in the pool of Plato for quite a while. Let's see if we can't get a little direction to this.
Okay, good idea.
When people ask me, as somebody who's been teaching for a while, what are some great books to read about teaching, I almost always suggest The Republic.
Do you almost always get an eye roll too?
Sure.
Okay.
Either because they don't want to get philosophical. What they're looking for is a book of methodologies. and I put a finger up when they say that, because I think they'll.
Hey, whoa, Steve!
I think you'll find.
Oh, your pointer finger. Your pointer finger.
A pause finger, not a middle finger. Okay. Got to remember that this is not a visual medium. You can't see me with my Jesus pointer up in the air there.
Right.
But hold on a moment, because I think you'll find Plato does provide methodological help. We talk a lot in education about Socratic teaching. Plato's kind of the dude for that. So it's not wrong to come to the Republic or any of his other writings looking at how he educates. I think that's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other eye roll is often because they just have never tried it. So the experience isn't there, and they have this preconceived notion that it's going to be dry or old or harsh or somehow not fit.
Well, and let's acknowledge that it is kind of weird, right? And not only that, it's a long book. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. So it's not ice cream. Like it's work getting through it.
And for an educator, we need to exercise ourselves in these kinds of things because we get so efficient. I've got X, Y, and Z material that needs to be covered. I've got X number of days to do that. Divide and conquer. I got to cover this today, and if I don't get through it all, we got to figure out a way then to.
Exactly.
We're so rushed. We're so slaves to the the clock. And a whole episode for us, I'm sure, would be why are we doing the 180 days and why are we on a agrarian calendar and so on and so forth. But I know where that normally winds up is people just don't want to lose their summer vacation. Right. But anyway, but we're in that, and so it puts us in this intense fire hose kind of form of teaching, and Plato's just not about that. Socrates just isn't. Socratic teaching doesn't allow you to be in a hurry. You're gonna ask a question and give time for it to develop, give time for it to be thought about. Take several possible answers, weigh them carefully, work through which one's the best answer, which ones can be dismissed. Maybe there's more than one sufficient answer, and now we got to figure out where we're going to go with that. And then inevitably, right, the next thing is, so what's the next question?
Yeah.
A philosophical question is never going to be answered. And that's really inefficient. It's really tough to say, okay, we've covered this, now let's take the test. So what I love about Plato is the dialogue format, two people talking to each other. It's almost like a podcast. That Socrates pretty quickly starts using analogies, and he hangs on them. And really, for a teacher who's coming to the Republic not because they want necessarily the big question, what is a just society? Though, if cultivation of wisdom and virtue is your goal in education, justice sort of seems to be important there. But if you're not coming to it for the content, there's still a methodological advance being made here. Plato is putting before us a way of two minds coming to understanding that is much different than what we might call the lecture mode. Okay, he occasionally feels like he's given a little bit of a lecture, but most of the time, it's just an investigation of an important question.
Right.
And my students are uncomfortable with that. Seniors more comfortable than freshmen, but our educational system seems to breed a kind of student that wants to know what the answer is, the answer that's going to be on the test.
Right.
And so when you open up a class with a what is a just society? What would it look like? And there's this silence, this uncomfortable dead air that all Americans hate to hear,
right?
Or not hear. Maybe a few people mumble something, but they just, at some point, the frustrated students just tell us what it is you're looking for.
Right.
What's the answer, Mr. Elliott? And then I blow their minds and go, I don't know. I asked a real question. Right. I got ideas.
Yeah.
This isn't about Mr. Elliott's definition of a just society. You're the students. I'm a student with you, but let's really put this out there. And so Plato demonstrates for us, I think, a real question that we don't know the answer to demands that we find something we already know that we can compare it with.
Right. And it demands a sort of equality, right? Or maybe not equality, but a mutual respect. I mean, my students always responded really well to me saying, when I would say this to them, and I think it's because I meant it. But I would say, hey, I respect you enough to ask you questions that I don't know the answer to. And I think that you can help me find these answers. And I think I can help you find these answers. Like we're better together. So this isn't a parlor trick. This isn't a game. Well, it's fun, but it's not a trick. I'm serious.
It's not a parlor trick. It's not a parlor trick, and it's not a job.
Right.
Where you don't get paid until we get the right answer.
Right. Right.
When you ask, what does a just society look like, which is what the Republic is about. You've kind of talked about the fact, well, what's a just man like? Well, let's put a bunch of people together and see what a just society. That might give us more to talk about, a better way to handle the thing. But almost immediately, you find Plato jumping into analogies.
Right.
Jesus does this.
Yes, he does.
What's the kingdom of God like? Well, it's like
Right.
a mustard seed, a lost coin, a lost sheep, a lost son,
Right.
a man
Or how
going
about from
into
earlier? The eye of the body is the
right.
lamp, or the eye is the lamp of the body. Right.
Yeah. And Paul follows along. What if the whole body were an eye?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
Yeah.
stupid. What if it were an ear? Could the ear then say to the eye, I have no need of you? So it would, of course, wax eloquent. But anyway, you made me promise before we started this, no bad humor, and I just broke it.
Hey, that's okay.
All right. So, but there's something here for the teacher that if you walk over to the switch on the wall and turn the lights out and say, what can you see? And you get them past the part to where they start naming some things they can see because it's still dim in there. And you flip the lights back on. Now you're teaching with an analogy. Sure. It's the light. And interestingly enough, this is why we got here to begin with. Plato loves this analogy when talking about what's going to be necessary to lead people to a just society. They're going to have to know true truth. And if falsity is going to screw things up big time in a city, so they've got to be able to find the truth. And he says they got to be able to find the light and live in the real light of truth, not in fake light. While this show is a back porch discussion, it does cost a little bit of money. So if you're liking what you hear, consider helping us out. You can simply use the donation button on the website to send along a one-time gift, or we have subscriber plans for those who want to commit to regular support. Subscribers can get premium rewards depending on how nice a chair you pull up on the porch. We have everywhere from sitting on the floor to our finest rocking chair available. But whatever you can do, know that it helps us keep the conversation going. And for that, we heartily thank you. The cave analogy is fascinating to me because he anticipates, or he knows because he's done this, that the very people that he's talking to, most of them are still chained up in the cave. And what he describes as somebody who's come out into the bright light of the truth, of course, gets excited and wants to run back in the cave and tell everybody else, hey, it's really cool out here. Come on out. And they're like, no, leave me alone. I'm fine. This is real freedom is found. Right. And we don't have to do anything in here. And, just that alone is incredibly informative from my point of view in what's going on in education today is we're content to let them just sit there and scrape off the cave wall what we throw up against the wall and put it on a test. And they're educated.
Right. And they are, they're informed. They're free. Well, that's what we would say, right? That they're, to stick with the analogy, that they're free. They're not chained up. But it's like, no, they are. Yeah, they're very much chained up still.
They think they're free, but they're not. And that's, it's the people that are reading the book are probably not even realizing that they're being described. Until they think about it.
Man, I'm having a hard time staying away from Kierkegaard. Because that's what that's his thing, right? Is the self-deception that we have. But okay, this is not the Kierkegaard episode, so I'm going to back away from that leg. But I do want to say, though, concerning Plato and the Republic and why it's worth reading. There are a lot of reasons, but one in particular that I think deserves, naming is that Plato is showing us in the Republic Socratic instruction. Like, it's a fantastic example of the way that Socrates as a teacher leads his students through a problem. It's a different way of teaching than the information delivery lecture model, right? And it's really, really important and really good for that reason. The other thing that I wanted to say, I just forgot all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well,
what was I going to say? Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
And that's fascinating to me. That we want to make. We've said this before. We want to make teaching a science. So there's steps, and if you'll just name off the steps, then I'll follow them. And surely there's a recipe. I think people think of lesson plans as recipes. What are the ingredients?
Yeah, when you say we want to, you mean modern education wants
those
to.
of us living in this day and time when utility is so important to education, practical outcome is what that it's so much easier to catch it from somebody.
Oh, that reminds me. Sorry, go ahead.
The best thing they ever did to me in teachers college is make me go observe good teachers. And I benefited from the theory classes, and we even had quote unquote methods classes where they would assign to each of us various pedagogical methods that we then had to come display to the rest of the class. That's sort of what we're talking. But what you're saying is the Republic itself is a lesson in teaching lessons, not in its outline, but in its manner. If you watch Socrates question these people and respond to their answers, you're getting a look into a master teacher's classroom and how he deals with trying to get that eye of the soul to see.
Exactly. The other part of that is in the Republic, you're also seeing the brilliance of Plato, because he paints his teacher, Socrates, in the best possible light. If you read anything by Xenophon, who was sort of the other disciple of Socrates that wrote about him, he has a couple books. It's not that important, but in his dialogues, it's interesting to see the way that Socrates talks, because he's clearly doing the same thing. But Xenophon also shows Socrates sort of like getting caught in his own questions, right? Like, or even perhaps worse or better, whatever. It's funny, is when one of his students will go, "Oh no, Socrates, I know what you're trying to do. You're going to ask me to say this so that when I say it, you can do this, but that's not going to work." And then the dialogue's just over. Right, like, oh well, that one didn't work.
Right. So Plato is a great example for college and high school teachers. Xenophon's more for the middle school teachers.
Yeah. Well, I use Xenophon in middle school because, man, learning about failure was really helpful.
Well, and they're going to try and get you. They're going to try and zing you. Right. They're going to try and call you out, especially in the world of Google. If they have any technology available to them, they're over there Googling everything you see, fact checking you. And of course, I'm perfectly happy to let them know that Google is often wrong.
Definitely.
I'm not, but Google is. Oh well, we're taking a work that's legitimate for a couple of different reasons, right? It's worthy to read it. If nothing else, here in America, it's a great salve to the strong beliefs we have about democracy.
True that.
Plato's not Plato's not real big on the whole democracy thing, as a Greek, interestingly enough.
Sure.
Because he's seen its problems and he acknowledges them. But in trying to get to the answer, we're watching him try and get there, right? How does he get there? And so these three analogies to me would be a great study in pedagogical analogy, because he's the sun is pretty obvious. That's his point.
Are you familiar with
you don't have to ask somebody, you know what the sun is, right? Maybe next week we'll go out and look at it so that you I want to make sure everybody's on the same page, or that that's the sun. And we're not living in some Star Wars world where there's two suns, and so then we get confused. In our world, we have one sun, and it is the light. And we'll break that open a little bit. But that question, what is truth? What should be taught to someone trying to make a just society? The response is truth. What is the truth? And he comes up with this analogy. Well, there's the sun. Is a controversial point these days, that there's just one truth. Hey, wait a minute. But then almost immediately, well, how do we know the truth? And he does. I love the fact that he doesn't go to Madison Avenue and sell us a short little jingle that convinces us, well, the truth is, he says that's a very tricky question. There's all kinds of truths, and there's all kinds of positions we have with the truth. And there's some things that we can really know that we know it fully. And there's some stuff we'll never be able to know. And we won't even know that we don't know it. It's so far beyond our knowing. That's the divided line thing going on there. But in particular, the cave's going to take a little time, because for any educator, okay, if you've convinced me that it's worth teaching, because the sun does exist, and not everything can be taught the same way, because the divided line tells us such.
How? Yeah.
What do I do? And the cave analogy is great for that. We got some work ahead of us. I will do my best with the website to provide some graphic illustrations of these analogies. But Jason and I are going to do our best to present these in the coming episodes as stunningly, adjectively brilliant as we can, so that you can see it with your mind's eye, at least as clearly as we see it. And we know we don't see it as clearly as we ought to. But by talking about it, hopefully we'll.
Yeah. And if you guys want to read ahead to try to kind of get a grasp on it before hearing the episode, book 7, like Steve said at the beginning, is where you're going to find those. I think book 7 and 8. And so hop on that, read a little bit of the Republic, and we'll talk to you next time.
Well, thanks again for joining us in this great conversation about education. We hope you will not just listen, but participate. Leave us a comment, suggestion, or thought on our website. You just never know when we'll use it on the show. Until next time, pursue joy and learn something.